I'm in the new Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, and it's the fastest and the most powerful Aston Martin road car to date. It's my first time in the car, and obviously, first thing I'm going to do is launch it. So here we go. Whoa, it's struggling for grip. Oh my God. Oh no, it's flying. In third, it's just flying. This is insane. I think I need to calm down. That was absolutely bonkers. You may think the DBS looks familiar. Well, that's because it's based on the DB11. However, that car is designed as a Grand Tourer. This is a Super Grand Tourer. Now, that doesn't mean that it wears a cape and solves crime. It means that the performance is super, and that's thanks to some key upgrades, which I'll just run through now. The 5.2 litre V12 twin turbo produces 725 horsepower, which is 150 more horsepower than it produces in the DB11. It also has 900 newton meters of torque. Now, that performance upgrade hasn't come from any mechanical changes. All they've done is reflash the ECU. The engine was always capable of that performance. They just turned it down in the cheaper car. The DBS is fitted with an uprated and strengthened 8-speed flappy paddle gearbox to cope with its engine's added performance. That said, the engine's torque is still limited in first and second gear to stop the gearbox from exploding. For added stopping power and reduced weight, you get carbon ceramic brakes as standard, and they're 360mm on the rear and a whopping 410mm here at the front. The adaptive suspension is stiffer and it sits the car 5mm lower to the ground than the DB11. Also, you've got a different wheel geometry setup, so the car is just a bit more pointy and agile. And then there's the rear limited slip differential, which is just more aggressive for improved corner exiting traction. Pirelli's created some special bespoke high performance tyres for this car, and they're wider than those on the DB11. For instance, at the back, they're 305mm wide. The DBS also has a range of aerodynamic features added to it over the normal DB11. These improve the flow of air over the car, as I'll explain now. First, it's divided by this huge front splitter. Some of the air goes underneath the car, and it's actually channeled through Venturi tunnels like you have on a Formula One car. Also, some of the air goes into through these ducts here. It then exits in front of the front wheels, goes over the outside of them, back inside the wheel arch, and then comes out of these side strakes. Now, as the air moves down the side of the car, it is then split by these wings which the door mirrors sit on, and that helps direct it into these huge vents you've actually got just by the rear windows. Now then, the air travels inside the bodywork, and then it finally exits here through these vents which are just behind the rear spoiler, and that kicks the air right up high here. Now, the air that's gone underneath the car is then divided by the dual rear diffuser. Once again, that's like you've got on a Formula One car. Then the air meets up somewhere up here. What that does is actually create downforce, and at its top speed, this car produces 180 kilos of downforce. Now, the DB11 on which it's based, actually at its top speed, has 20 kilograms of lift. Now, the interesting thing is that Aston Martin has managed to create that downforce without increasing this car's drag over the DB11. This car is called the Superleggera, which is Italian for super light. To tell you the truth, that name, well, it's a little bit of a lie. You see, this car still weighs 1,800 kilos. However, it is 70 kilos lighter than the DBS, and to put that into context, I weigh around 70 kilos. Now, the way they've kept the weight down is to use carbon fibre for lots of different parts. So you've got a carbon fibre bonnet, you've got a carbon fibre roof, there's a carbon fibre boot lid, and all the added aero, that's carbon fibre too. All these upgrades come at a price though. The DBS starts from £225,000. That's around £60,000 more than the DB11. And for that, you'd hope it stands out. Thankfully, it's really easy for everyone, even non-car experts, to spot this is the more expensive car. I mean, there's already that aero that I've talked about, such as that huge rear diffuser. The DBS also gets a fixed rear wing. On the DB11, it's hidden and it pops up mechanically. Also on this DBS, you've got a full-length light bar which runs the width of the car. You don't have that on the DB11, but by fitting that, it means there's no room for the traditional winged Aston Martin badge. So they've just written the Aston Martin in bigger letters, and why not? Now, as you move down the side of the car, you have 21-inch forged alloy wheels as standard. The DBS also gets a wider track, makes it a little more muscular and meaner. It sits low to the ground. You've got these larger and deeper side skirts. There's DBS badging, there's those side strakes there which are really aggressive. On the DB11 they're just slat. Now here in the bottom there's some huge air vents there to help cool the engine and let it breathe. Then as you move around the front there's the splitter here and an absolutely massive gaping grille. I mean, look at the size of that. It's huge. It looks like it's going to gobble up the road. Now there is one thing that I'm not so keen on, and it's the badging here for Super Leggera. It just looks a little bit aftermarket to me. There is an interesting story behind it. So Aston's Chief Creative Officer, Marek Reitman, said that one of the reasons they went for that name is because Ferrari called that 812 the super fast, which is obviously an English word. So they thought, tell you what, why don't we call our car Super Leggera, which is Italian.
Inside, the DBS also takes things up a notch over the DB11. You get racy dials, carbon fibre trim, sporty stitching and racing seats.
There are certain things that I love about this car's interior, such as the way they've matched the pattern on the seats to the roof lining. Also, all the bulbs in here, such as these up there, they're LED. You won't find a normal bulb anywhere on this car. And look at this, right? You've got electrical operation, not only for the steering wheel, but also for the lid of the centre console. And then everything that looks like metal, actually, yes, is indeed metal. I also like these, look. These sun visors just feel so high quality, especially the way the cover for the mirror slides. Then you've got some mod cons as well, such as, look, a surround view camera and all the other kind of electrical bits and pieces that you'd imagine on a car of this class. But it's not all perfect. There are a few things that I'm not so keen on, such as how you operate the climate control through these touch-sensitive buttons. And because there's no physical ridge on the buttons, you don't really know where they are when you're driving along. So you're having to take your eyes off the road for far too long, which isn't great in a car that is this powerful. I'm not a big fan of these air vents either, because they just feel cheap and plasticky, and you do have to touch them. And there's some other things to do with the build quality. I mean, this cover for the airbag, well, it dropped out earlier and it doesn't really fit very well. Maybe we can put this down to the fact that this is an early production car. Hopefully, oh, I can't get that back in now, just leave it there. Hopefully, for customer cars, all that will be sorted.
And this brings me on to what's not so good about the Aston Martin DBS.
While the infotainment system is better than in previous Aston Martins, it's actually Mercedes' old system, which means it's not great. Also, you've got the Mercedes touchpad and swivel wheel, which is a bit awkwardly laid out, and Aston Martin have made it even worse by adding some extra girth to it. So use that for too long, you're going to end up with RSI and like a claw hand, so you'll end up driving down the road like Captain Hook. For such a brutish car, the cup holders are rather feeble. I mean, look at these. They're not really going to keep your drink steady when you accelerate. It's going to go everywhere. Oops. I don't know what it is with Aston Martin, but they don't like to fit glove boxes to their cars. What, do Aston Martin owners not own gloves? To be fair, most people don't put their gloves in the glove box, they use it for other stuff, but still, Aston, they could do something with the dead space behind there. Unlike the DB11, there is no hands-free boot opening, and that's because with the carbon fibre rear splitter, the technology which recognises your waving foot just won't work. So instead you have a boot release, which is kind of hard to locate. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. Finally. Then there's the boot. Now it's all right, Aston Martin says you can fit a set of golf clubs in there, but I'm not so sure. Maybe only a child's set. The electric motor for the seat makes a right old racket. Listen to this. Sounds a bit like a cow mooing. Maybe it's the ghost of the cow which donated its hide.
Thankfully though, there's still plenty to like about the DBS.
All the leather used in the interior comes from Scottish Highland cows. Now they have long hair which protects their skin and means that it doesn't get marked by barbed wire, scratches or insect bites. And so it's super smooth, very soft, and it doesn't really need treating at all. And it smells extremely strong of luxurious leather. The only problem is that seems to be attracting the local horse flies. Get off! You don't have to slam the bonnet down to shut it because it automatically latches itself. Does it on the boot as well. The DBS gets quad tailpipes and the exhaust system is 10 decibels louder than that of the DB11. Yeah! I love the design of some of the functional aero, such as these side strakes. I mean, that just looks super cool when you got the bonnet up. Then there's the internal air channels for the virtual spoiler, which have these metal strings which you can actually play like a harp. In fact, you could use this to do the music for a horror film. Listen. Right then, let's talk about the driving experience, and it is dominated by the bonkers engine. Now there's loads of cool stats about it, but I can't remember them, so I'm going to quickly refer you to a man from Aston Martin.
So 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds, 0 to 100 miles per hour in 6.4 seconds. Fourth gear, 50 to 100 miles per hour is 4.2 seconds, which by the way is a second faster than the 812 Superfast. Top speed of 211 miles per hour, which is the fastest road going Aston to date.
Really, for me, the thing about this engine is the insane pulling power. So I'm in fourth gear, I'm just under 2000 RPM, I'm just going to put my foot down. And it's going to come on boost. And now... Oh! The way it pulls in fourth gear, it's like most of the performance cars in second. Oh! Thankfully, as well as insane performance, this car has insanely strong brakes. Now, they do feel a little bit grabby when you first press them, so yeah, you just touch them and it's like, oh god, ooh. And that can, at first, when you're not used to them, make you feel a little bit sick as you jerk to a stop. But when you're heading through the mountains and you're using them a lot, because they're carbon ceramic, they don't overheat, so they're always there to pull you up, which is good. Then there's the handling. You can chuck it about a bit if you want to. The only thing that you've got to watch though, obviously, is when you put your foot down. Yes, there's a decent amount of grip like that then. You're going to want to keep your stability control on, because if you put your foot down too eagerly, it'll want to go sideways. Now, as bad luck would have it, I appear to have driven into a cloud. And it's starting to rain and the road's very wet and slippery, so yeah, with all that power going through just the rear wheels, I'm not going to push this car, but this gives me the opportunity to talk about what this car's like just to cruise around in. So I'm going to press this button on the steering wheel to put the suspension into its softest setting, and press this one over the other side to put the engine into its more relaxed setting, and it also quietens the exhaust note as well. And then going to put the car into drive and see what it's like just for touring. Yeah, it's reasonably comfortable, the gearbox is smooth. Yeah, if I put my foot down, it responds. Oh, the car does wiggle with this wet road. Yeah, I could quite easily do a lot of miles in this. It's fine. Oh, this looks a little bit like a swimming pool. I think I'll just pull over and wait for the rain to stop. It seems to be getting worse and it's now starting to hail. This is not very good luck on the launch of a Super GT car. Well, it's still raining a bit, unfortunately, and we've got to head back, return the car and head to the airport now, so time's up. And after my short time driving this car, what do I think of it? Well, you know, Aston Martin says that the DB11 is like a Savile Row suit, whereas this is a brute in a suit. And I think that's pretty much spot on, because yes, it can feel civilized if you want it to be, but you press a few buttons, you plant your right foot, and this thing, I mean, it's, yes, just an absolute monster. Woo!